Hi everyone, Effie here. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card using our Fresh Cut Roses for our National Craft Month Challenge. I'm going to take the largest and second largest orchids in the set and I'm going to stamp them in our Ruby Collection inks, but I'm only using the mid-tone and the darkest tone, so that's Soft Garnet and Red Sangria. After I stamp the three orchids, I'm going to mask off the smaller one and then I'm going to stamp the same smaller orchid in Soft Garnet. After I finish with the first layer, I'm going to start to stamp the second layer in Red Sangria, and I'm just going to do that for all four orchids. And as you can see, I'm stamping them kind of off the panel, which is what I want. For the orchids that I'm using today, I'm only using the first two layers. I'm not using that third layer. After the two layers are stamped, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the stamens, I think they're called, of the orchids. I'm stamping that first most solid layer in Peach Blossom, and then I'm going to stamp all four at the same time while I have my Peach Blossom out. Then I'm going to take the second layer and stamp that in our Coral Cavern Dye Ink, which is one of the new inks that was released yesterday. It's a nice, it's a kind of a bright red with heavy coral undertones, so it's kind of a nice color in between coralline and spice chai, but I did release it as a standalone color. After I stamp the florals and the orchids, I'm going to apply mask to the three orchids on the right side of my A2 cardstock panel. Now, how I created these masks was I just stamped the most solid layers of the orchids onto some copy paper, and I just cut it out close to the line. After the masks have been applied, I'm going to stamp the stem from the set in our Found Topaz Dye Ink. Again, this is one of our new inks that came out yesterday. It's part of our Cocoa collection. It's our brown collection of layering inks. This is just a close-up of what our stamp panel looks like so far. After that, I'm going to take this little stamp here, and I'm going to stamp it in our Aspen Cocoa Dye Ink, and I'm just going to stamp it right along the stem. If you have ever seen orchid plants, they have these little things. So I thought I'd make a more realistic set and include this. So after the stem is all set, I'm going to stamp the leaves. I'm going to take the bigger and smaller stamp and stamp them in our new Crystal Garden layering inks. As you can see, I just go ahead and I stamp the three layers. I've stamped two extra blooms off camera because I will be using them later. Then I took our new rectangle double stitch dies and I die cut the first and third dies onto an A2 size purple cardstock. I think it's basil. It has some texture to it. I took the inside piece and I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment right onto the panel with some Versamark ink, and then I'm going to gold heat emboss it. Before I actually stamp the Versamark, I did prep the cardstock with some anti-static powder tool. After I finish heat embossing, I'm going to buff all that powder away with just a piece of tissue. Then I'm going to apply adhesive to the back of that inside panel, and to help me position it, I take that border panel and I place it over my top folding A2 card base. It's just regular black cardstock, and then I adhere that inside panel within that border, and then I'm going to take that border out, and then I'm going to adhere some dimensional foam tape on all four sides. I have that giant roll of foam tape and I apply liberally because I want to make sure that the panel is nice and firm on top of my card base. Now, what I don't show on camera was that I ran the two stamp panels through my scan and cut to get a cutout of the blooms on the stem and the two individual blooms and also the leaves. You could fussy cut everything. There are no coordinating dies for this yet, but even if I did have coordinating dies, it'd be kind of difficult to cut this cutout by hand. So I took some adhesive to the back of the blooms on the stem, and I'm going to just adhere it right on top of the border panel. Then I'm going to take some foam dots and put it under the blooms that are hanging off towards that middle panel so that they stay popped up. Next, I'm going to take the smaller orchid bloom and I'm just going to pop that up right towards the middle of my panel with some foam tape, and then after the smaller bloom has been positioned, I'm going to adhere the larger bloom towards the right side of the panel. This way the orchids kind of have a more natural look and feel. So after I apply that larger orchid, I'm going to just trim off the excess so that they're not hanging off the cards. Then I'm going to adhere the leaves the same way with some adhesive at the base of the stem, and I'm going to trim away all the parts that are hanging off the card. All the colors that I'm using today on this card are from the color palette that was chosen by the design team participating in the challenge today. Now I'm going to apply some sequins. I have some of our glass slipper sequins in 6, 5, and 4 millimeter, and I'm just going to adhere them in a visual triangle right onto our panel around our sentiment. And now the card is finished. I thank you all for joining me, and I hope you guys will participate in our challenge and submit cards inspired by our color palette. Thanks for stopping by, and see you next time.